Hey guys, this is the Church Mental Health 5-minute break where we're going to take a topic that you guys asked about to want to know a little bit more information in under 5 minutes. So we got a question from Christy that asks, why is it that Christians are so adverse to talking about mental health and why do they think it's sinful? Which is an excellent question to ask, especially when you're talking with Christian counselors, when you're talking with pastors, when you're talking about Christians who struggle with mental illness. In fact, because there is this stigma that happens with mental illness, when we talk about this, we realize there's a whole stigma that comes around it. And what that means is that we do not want to talk about it. And so whether we intentionally or unintentionally put this stigma out there, this do not bring it up, it's not what you're talking about, maybe it's actually seen as hurtful to bring up in a church context, we put our arm out, we give them the stiff arm, we don't allow them to come in and ask these questions. And so sometimes we answer these questions because we don't know the answer. And so to your question, the first thing I would say is we don't know the answer to these questions. And so we're scrambling this last minute to be able to come up with something. In fact, I'll give you a little hint. When I was doing youth ministry, we had this book called the Youth Ministry Crisis Guide. And so to be fair, this is absolutely appropriate. But when a crisis came up, we would go grab this book, look up some stuff about it just so that we were mentally prepared when we entered into the situation. So if someone was sexually abused, a teenager that was in my youth group, I'd probably go grab this book, flip through, it's like 2 pages long, some questions to ask, some things not to do, and then go talk with them. Now, 2 pages worth of conversation before I go do this is not enough time and not enough things to do. And in fact, unless you're practicing this as a counselor every day or you're working as a minister in a place where this happens quite frequently, which there are those that do that, that would be a really, really tough ask to do. Now, if there's people that are grieving because they've lost someone, that tends to be something that comes up a lot. If we're talking about feeling so stressed out, especially with everything going on with the coronavirus or with work changes or with thinking about with divorce, those are all common conversations. But when we talk about mental illness, within the church, it's not been something that's been very common to talk about. And so to be able to educate yourself is the first step. The second thing I would really put out there is that whenever we talk about this, we don't bring into a conversation about what does it mean as far as what God is thinking of with this. So people say it's sinful, and that's really because they're mixing a couple of things up. There's a really couple good books out there that I would highly encourage you to check out. The first one is by Matthew Stafford, and he talks about in his book where we get this understanding of what is spiritual and what is biological or mental. And it does not mean that God is not in the things that are biological or mental. It means that it's not necessarily a spiritual direct thing, only that. In fact, I would actually encourage you to recognize that maybe there's a blending of these two. And sometimes God uses some of this stuff for ourselves. In fact, we see it in Scripture. And sometimes Satan uses this as well. And so it's not necessarily always going to be one thing or the other, but a lot of times we try to radicalize it as one of those. And so Matthew Stafford in his book talks about the idea of what is schizophrenia and what is demon possession. And it's a really, really good chapter. He has a whole bunch more in that book beyond that. He's taken a lot of time to study this. Then there is also Stevegersevich he's a spiritual mentor from, where he talks about a lot with trying to create an inclusion mental health ministry and trying to bring that into the church. And the first thing you do is you have to know the players. You have to know what your church wants, and you have to know how to bring that into the church. So for me to give you an answer of it's this way really, really makes it hard. And so I'm not going to give you this is the way you do it, but what I would say is it starts with understanding, getting rid of the stigma, educating yourself, and then being able to bring all of that into context. If you haven't already done so, have a pastor, sit down with a Christian counselor, sit down with someone with mental illness, and let them have a conversation and see what happens. And from there, you'll be able to see what the needs of your church are, and maybe even start to ask what other churches are doing as well. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. We'll catch you next time. Bye.